Okay, welcome everyone to our first podcast. I'm Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek, and with me today via Skype is Marcus Curtis in
Hello, everyone.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hi, how you doing?
Marcus, as I said in my, I guess, one of my more recent videos, not the last video that I did, but Marcus is my best friend and fellow guitarist and apologist and technician.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus and I've been working on the technology to get this thing working, and this is kind of a first run for us here.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
learning from this to see in future podcasts what we need to work on as far as the light, the audio, the video, the connection, just everything, all things considered. We'll be referencing this to see what we need to improve on. But anyway, Marcus, you want to tell my subscribers, and I guess maybe your subscribers too, when you get your YouTube channel going, a little bit about how this all came about, how we got started doing blogs and Skyping and writing ebooks and all of that.
Yeah, well, see, we play guitar a lot for the Tulsa Guitar Society. We played around Tulsa area, and we had a good time playing guitar and fingerstyle guitar and acoustic guitar and open tunings, and it was really a lot of fun. Then we got involved in some financial scams where we discovered them, and we started targeting these financial scams because they targeted Christians. And it basically was built on conspiracy theories. There were a lot of conspiracy theories in these scams, and you had to believe all this stuff that really wasn't true. And they tried to tie this whole thing to biblical prophecy, and it was really a bunch of malarkey, I guess would be the word to use. And so we started a YouTube channel and started debunking all this. And we have our websites, our economic websites that we had that we started to debunk a lot of these scams to warn Christians. And in the process of this, we were contacted by a lot of Christian people about how to get their loved ones out of the scam, and businesses that fell for it that were Christian that wound up putting their retirement accounts in it and things like that. And they came to our sites for talking points and how to debunk it. And I wrote a book, and it did pretty well. Still doing pretty well. It sells in 24 countries around the world, believe it or not. I never thought I'd be an author, but it's one of those things I kind of fell into. Well, I had no desire to write a book, but I needed to find some way to debunk this thing. And
Go ahead and
so
give
as
us the name for it.
Oh, it's called The Truth About the Coming Global Currency Reset. And what it's about is global economics. It shows economics from the big picture without really complicating anything. It doesn't have a lot of long equations or anything like that. It just shows you how the global economic picture works. And the reason for the book is to debunk all the lies and rewritten history about global economics that these scam artists would use to try to sell their wares. And it has sold pretty well. But it was my first experience writing a book, and it was a lot of work. And the websites were a lot of work, but it was paying off because a lot of people were coming out from underneath the scam, and it's affected many, many people. And from that point, we started doing podcasts on that topic of the economics, global economics. We talked about the history of money. We talked about the Federal Reserve, central banking systems. There's been 3 central banks in the United States. We talked about the actual history of that. We've talked about the history of the Great Depression and all the economic ups and downs that the country has had. And in an effort to explain what the current global economic picture is. And this shut down the scam, more or less. And from that point, we turned our attention to Christian apologetics. I've been a Christian since the 1980s, and I started going to church in 1981, and I got involved heavily in Bible reading, Bible studying. I studied theology, biblical prophecy, eschatology, studied theology in detail. And so we started to confront atheists. And so that's where this whole thing has led to, is the deception found in things like evolution and other things that atheists use. That's very deceitful. So we started debunking these kind of things, and we've come up against some heavy hitters. But still, it's been interesting. Our work in economics and debunking these economic conspiracy theory scams has led to this. And so now I've been heavily involved in researching in theology and apologetics, and I've been working on more books, and which is a chore. So I set aside a little time every week to write, and I got 3 of them in the works now. Um, but the whole idea is to get the information out there. I don't charge a lot of money for these books. They're just ebooks. You can download them. But the whole idea is to get people to get the information out there. When we were doing the economics blog in that section, we started to go into these forums, and I saw a lot of the talking points from my book being used in these economic forums. And the information was getting out there. So I felt that was great, because I don't care about making money off the book. That's not the thing. The thing is to get the information out there, and if other people take it and run with it, that's great. I don't care about plagiarism. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want people to be set free from this stuff, this baloney that the enemy uses to bind people.
This was a widespread scam too. This was
Global, yeah.
yeah, and literally tens of thousands of people
Oh yeah, that's
involved in this. And I guess you said that one of your most popular countries was Malaysia, right?
Malaysia, yeah, Malaysia. I got a lot of hits from the website from Malaysia. At one point in January, I think I had 25,000 hits on that website. But we had a lot of people come and get information from there, and you can see the comment sections and the debates that happened. And a lot of this is not Christian based. A lot of it is based in economics and people who are stuck in believing weird things about the Federal Reserve, about America's money, and all that. You find these guys get trapped into gold and silver, and they become preppers, and they think that all this stuff ties into biblical prophecy, and there's a lot of stuff that's not really true at all. These guys get sucked into this, and it starts with all of these conspiracy theories. So the global currency reset is actually one conspiracy theory with a lot of sub-conspiracy theories inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
like
as weird.
Federal Reserve, the theories about the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, not just that, but New Age philosophies, Nasara, and all this stuff that's tied into it. It's just like, I can't believe how people would fall for this stuff and think it's part of a biblical prophecy when you have New Age philosophy entwined with it. Mm-hmm. So we wound up debunking a lot of that stuff.
This is where we cross over into apologetics, when we started encountering New Age philosophy overlapping with the Christian community.
Right.
And you find out that there's a lot of New Age type beliefs in the church from people who haven't really been educated about theology and sound doctrine. I know growing up as a Baptist back in the 1970s, my family started playing around with astrology. My mother believed that Edgar Cayce was a prophet. Mm. And my sister believed in reincarnation. And so when I left the Baptist church and started going to an Assembly of God church, I carried a lot of those beliefs with me, just out of, naivety. I didn't know any better. This is what I was exposed to in a Baptist home. We were church-going people, and yet we had a lot of these ideas that these Assembly of God people straightened me out on. That's of the devil,
Right.
We had a Ouija board in our home.
Right.
And it was just considered kind of a toy, you know. People found out about that and said, you need to get that out of your house.
Right.
That stuff's of the devil. So I got up to speed pretty quick when these Assembly of God people started hearing these things coming out of my mouth. Yeah. They knew the Bible, and they knew that there was a difference between biblical doctrine and New Age philosophy.
Right.
They knew the difference between reincarnation and resurrection. I didn't. They had to set me straight on that. So, if our home was typical of a lot of people who are not biblically literate, no telling how many people out there who consider themselves Christians have these ideas, mixed in with their Christian beliefs.
Right. I think you just hit the surface of it, though, because there's a lot of other ideas that people have. For example, Adam is not a fictional character, and those days in Genesis aren't thousands of years. Jesus did not die for mythical Adam who brought mythical sin into the world. Adam was a real person. Would you
Hmm.
be surprised how many Christians don't believe that? Or because of evolution, or they don't know the history behind evolution or how evolution came to be. There's a lot of things they take for granted, and they think science today is the way science was, 200 years ago. That's simply not the case.
Hmm.
Science was hijacked, and it was hijacked, and people are not even aware that it was hijacked.
Right. We'll be getting into that in future videos as we delve further into the subjects of apologetics
Mm-hmm.
and worldviews, Christian worldviews, and everything. This is part of what I've talked about before. How 5 years ago I was a theistic evolutionist. Now I believed that God created Adam and Eve, but I believed that that story was an allegory. That
Yeah.
it was a Genesis account of something that can be explained in scientific terms and with evolution. And then I actually started learning about evolution, which,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with you, I had just been lazy and I never really studied it. I just decided, well, the people who've studied this are experts. This is what they say. I'm not going to argue with it. The biblical account must be an allegory.
Right.
And once I began to actually study evolution, I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. There's genetic programming in DNA. You can't get information from a naturalist process, and you can't
Right.
have a guided, unguided process
Right.
like theistic
Right.
evolution says. So I had to rework all of my understanding of the biblical account of Genesis and conclude that whether it makes sense to us or not, the biblical account needs to be taken literally. I do
Mm-hmm.
have my own theory on this. I do believe that there's a happy medium between the 6,000 years of recorded history for man and what science says. I think that there's an answer somewhere that we don't have the information on it yet. And I did a video on this about young Earth and old Earth
Mm-hmm.
creationism. I think that there's a way we can reconcile the two if we just understand the force of gravity and time and everything. But that's for a future video. We won't worry about that right now. But at least I completely 86ed the idea of theistic evolution.
Right.
Evo-
Well,
Evolution, whether you believe in God or not, it doesn't make sense. You don't get information from a purely naturalist process. And the
that's
amount of
right.
information that's required for one cell to function as it does is massive.
Yeah, it's incredible. One cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing molecular machine.
Hmm.
But you see, a lot of people struggle with the same things because when they go into school, by the sixth grade, they're hit with all this evolution stuff. And they learn it all throughout high school. Then they even go to college. Well, the problem is when you go to college, it's not just learning evolution because, in a Christian background, if you have experienced the presence of God and if you have a walk with God and you know who He is, um, you can really, take a stand against this kind of thing. But a lot of Christians go to high school and then they go to college, and then their faith is bombarded not just with evolution, but with secular scholars and secular historians who basically discredit the Bible through a bunch of series of lies. For example, they say the JEPD theory. They say that the Old Testament was actually written in Babylon. And I've even seen History Channel programs that claim the same thing. And that's not the case. But they say that writing never came about till Babylon. And the first 5 books of Moses were actually written in Babylon. And that David was a fictional character and Solomon was a fictional character. And Moses never really existed. And so they discount all this stuff. And so while they're showing you evolution, they're also destroying your faith in the Bible by attacking it through their false archaeology and false lies
Hmm.
and their false misrepresentation of the history. Because we know if you go to actual biblical archaeology, everything they say is not true. Now, either there's only two things: either they're passing out information and they're not up on the current archaeological studies, or they're outright lying to you. It's just one of the other.
Mm-hmm.
For example, writing didn't even begin till Babylon. Well, you have some pretty good archaeological studies and finds that have shown artifacts that dated to 400 to 600 to 700 years before Babylon, where there's Hebrew writing on it.
Mm.
And I could list them. As a matter of fact, I have a list of them all. And so if you're going to tell me that Hebrew writing didn't exist until Babylon and that Moses couldn't wrote those books, now I wouldn't know any better if I didn't have this background. As a student walking into the university, I think, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And I take that as fact.
Right.
Meanwhile, that opens it up for me to accept evolution. And
Mm.
that's the danger. They tear down one side and build up the other. And that's what they do.
Yeah. I think I've told you this story before, that the entertainer John Davidson,
Mm-hmm.
famous singer, and he hosted the Hollywood Squares for a number of years. When he came into show business, he had this squeaky clean image as being the son of a Methodist minister.
Mm-hmm.
And after he was 60 years old and his career was pretty much over, he came out as an atheist. And he explained the reason. He just let people think that he was, a Christian for many years, because back then it helped his image
Right.
in show business. But he said he went to college and took a class on comparative religions,
Mm-hmm.
where they tell you that Christianity borrows from a lot of the myths of other religions that were
Which is not true. That's commonly taught.
right. But that's my point. It is commonly taught. It isn't true, and we, because of the advent of the internet, we have access to information now
Right.
to debunk a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
The movie Zeitgeist is another good example
Yeah.
of information that people take that makes Christianity look like a man-made religion, piecemeal from different myths and different religions that came before it.
Right.
And like Horus supposedly.
All that is wrong. All of that is wrong, though. Yeah. But I watched that movie. They're wrong on their portrayal of the Federal Reserve, and they're wrong on their portrayal of Horus being a pre-Christ figure.
I also think they're wrong on the 9/11 conspiracy theory, but we'll get into that.
I want to get into that later. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so it's important for people to understand the biblical account and the information that supports the biblical account when they start, reading up or listening to an instructor, professor, or somebody talk about these things.
Right.
If you have the information about archaeology and so forth that you're prepared to share with people, then somebody starts trying to tell you, well, the Bible was written in Babylon.
You're right.
And
you can debunk it.
Right. You're equipped. And that's the whole idea, is to equip people. I said in a previous video that the biggest threat to Christianity comes from secularism.
Right.
Atheists, agnostics, people who don't have any use for religion. They may not consider themselves atheists or agnostics. They just call themselves apatheists.
Right.
Which,
right.
I don't know if God exists, and I don't care if he's not relevant to me.
Right.
And so they fit into the same category of secularists.
Right.
That they approach life and they approach their worldview from a purely naturalist standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a God, he's not relevant. And that's secular.
Right. Well, one point, one of those archaeological finds was a piece of a pillar that was found at Tel Dan. Now, a lot of these things are newer, so some university professors might not have this information, but Israel knows. They just they dug up a piece of a pillar that was erected by the king of Damascus, and there's pictures of it on the internet. You can go look for it yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. And in this pillar, it talks about King David, and it references David's dynasty. And because it was erected by the king of Damascus, they know about when it dates. It dates about 100 years after David would have been king. Mm-hmm. And on this little piece of the pillar they found, it references David's dynasty as the house of David. It calls David's dynasty the house of David. Here is somebody that these universities would call a fictional character, but yet here's a pillar that has David on it about 100 years after David would have lived, and about hundreds of years before they claimed there was writing.
Mhm.
So this proves all their theories. They come up with all these theories and they say, we need proof. We don't know this for a fact. We need proof. Well, now we're digging up this proof,
Right.
but
It,
they're not sharing this information.
it's interesting that as a lot of new information is uncovered, these people keep raising the bar
Yeah, they come up with some other weird theory.
and say, well, that's not sufficient evidence, and the standard that they're requiring is greater than the standard that they would require in non-religious literature, like
Right,
Julius Caesar or
right,
Shakespeare or things like that. They don't need that many documents to
right.
say, well, this is the real thing, this is legitimate. But with Christianity, I mean, it's the account of the life of Jesus and
Hmm.
the epistles and the number of manuscripts that we have that confirm that, it's
Hmm.
just far and away the greatest historical account of any person in history.
Right. Somewhere around 5,133 manuscripts for the New Testament alone.
Should have known you would have the number on that.
Yeah, not only that, the Dead Sea Scrolls dates back 200 years before Christ. Now, universities used to teach that the Bible has changed, and if you could see the way it's changed over the years, you'd be astonished at how different it was. And the oldest manuscripts we have date back about 1,100 years after Christ, and we had the Textus Receptus and those kind of things. Well, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, guess what? Inside the Dead Sea Scrolls, all those scrolls that they found were all the books of the Bible except the book of Esther. Okay. And they dated all these scrolls as being 200 years before Christ. Okay. So that means that, and they compared these scrolls to the book of Isaiah they had today. They used to say in these universities that Isaiah was two separate books, where chapter 40 of Isaiah ends. You could pick up Isaiah on another book, and they just made it one book. And they touted that as a change. Well, when they looked at the scroll of Isaiah they got from the Dead Sea Scrolls, you get down to the end of chapter 40. Now, man divided it in chapter and verse at the Geneva Bible, which is like 1599 is when it was. But before that, there wasn't chapter and there wasn't verse. And you can go back and they looked at where in the book of Isaiah where chapter 40 ends, and it continues on as if it didn't end. And the scroll proved that Isaiah was in two separate books. That's another thing these universities used to say. So they make up stuff and they put it out there about the Bible, and none of it is true. And then they look at you and say, you got to prove me wrong. You don't have the evidence.
Mhm.
And well, now the evidence is starting to surface. So it's just amazing to me. And even if you were to take the whole Bible and throw it out, you can reconstruct most of the Bible from what the founding church fathers wrote to each other, because they quoted scripture. I
Right.
think there's like 11 verses, minus 11 verses. You can reconstruct the entire New Testament from what the founding church fathers quoted each other.
Polycarp, Tertullian.
Right, exactly. And you
Yeah.
can compare that to today's manuscripts, and you can see there's no change.
Hmm.
So I don't see where they get that. But this is one of the things. If you don't have this background, though, you're not going to know this stuff.
Right. So we'll be talking about these things a lot in future podcasts and so forth. This is primarily just an introductory podcast so that you can get to know Marcus, my accomplice, my partner in crime, and
We're thick as thieves.
Marcus, most of you know my background. I was born and raised Southern Baptist. I wandered into an Assembly of God church when I was 17, and that brought me into the writings of Kenneth Hagin, and then I entered into the Charismatic movement. Marcus came a completely different route, but arrived at pretty much the same place theologically as I did. Tell them a little bit about your path.
My path was Pentecostal. I had a guy knock on my door one time, ask me if I wanted to talk about Jesus. None of my family went to church. We didn't have any religious background whatsoever. I wasn't raised in it. And at first, I thought this guy was a Jehovah's Witness.
You were Roman
And
Catholic, though, right? Your family was non-practicing Catholic, Italians.
yeah, we were Italians and Catholic, but I never went to church in my youth.
I
So
didn't. You never went at all.
Well, I did when I was like 5. I went to like Bible school or something, and Sunday school. That was so that my mom could have a break. There was a bunch of us, so. But yeah, it was not anything that really. I think about a year, but that was all I've had.
Okay.
But when I was 19, 18, 19, this guy knocked on my door, asked me if I wanted to talk about Jesus. And I thought, okay, how am I going to get rid of this guy? And I thought he was a Jehovah's Witness, right? At first, I'm thinking, okay, where's your Watchtower magazine? So he started talking about charismatic stuff and the Holy Spirit, to move the Spirit of God and how God is real. I thought, this is one of the most animated Jehovah's Witnesses I've ever seen. And then he asked me if I wanted a Bible study. And I thought, I don't have a Bible. So I thought that would be it. And he started jumping down, up and down for joy. He says, I got a Bible. I got a Bible. Last night I went to this thing and I won a Bible as a door prize. And I thought, Lord, I don't need a Bible. Why did I win this Bible? Now I meet you the next day and I know this is for you. So I'm thinking, how am I going to get rid of this? I'm still thinking, how am I going to get rid of this guy? And then I discovered he played guitar. So I said, come on in, come on in. And I invited him in the house. I grabbed the guitar and I gave it to him. I said, play something. I wanted to see how good he was. And he was pretty good. So I made a deal. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll go through your Bible study, but you got to give me guitar lessons too. And so I started getting guitar lessons. He showed me some things on guitar, and we went through the Bible. And he went to a Pentecostal church. He went to the Pentecostal church, and people, I've seen people healed. I've seen the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I've seen people who had things like diabetes and things that were just reversed. They went to the doctor and the insulin, they didn't need insulin anymore. They got sick from taking their insulin because they didn't need it. Mm-hmm. And when you see all this stuff, at one time, there was this gal, an older gal, she set her glasses down and she went and prayed for somebody. And then when she came back, she went to put her glasses on and she didn't need them anymore. And she wasn't even praying for herself. And when you see stuff like this and you see it firsthand, how can you look at an atheist and take them seriously when they say there is no such thing as natural causes? There's no explanation for this. They'll say, oh, there's no such thing beyond natural causes. You go into a church and you see God moving, you see people healed. How do you explain that if there are no natural causes? There is no explanation. And so that's when I started going to church. And it's been since the 80s. And, we're not perfect and we've been through a lot, but I've learned a lot over the years about God and who he is. And it's just amazing, the compassion. And people think, oh, no, I don't want to be a Christian because I'm afraid of what God's going to take away from me. Listen, the only thing God's going to take away from you is sin. That's all you have to worry about. People think that Christ is going to impede on their lifestyle and they can't be a Christian, can't walk with God because they're afraid of what they're going to lose. Everything you're going to lose is worth losing. Because I still play my guitar. I still play my styles of music. I still, do some of the things that I thought I would have to give up in the beginning. But really, the only thing to give up is sin. And Jesus takes that. And it's really a better lifestyle. But that's the hidden secret. No one knows that Christianity is a better lifestyle because they're busy having too much fun. So.
Yeah, it's a self-destructive lifestyle that people think that this is fun. I'm enjoying my life. And the Bible does say there's pleasure in sin for a season. But that first time you take a LSD or heroin or whatever, it feels good. And then you're hooked and your life is hell.
Right.
And, it's not the drug analogy, could apply to a number of areas that you think you're having fun, but before you know it, your life is, a downward spiral. Yeah,
but it's important to note that LSD is not addictive. So, but heroin is. But yeah, I get your point.
I have to admit, I have no experience with heroin or LSD.
Oh, yeah. I dropped acid once. I burned a hole right through my shoe. It was a bad experience. So,
rim shot.
Yeah, rim shot.
I have to find the setting on my machine to do the rim shot.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then you were in the UPC, right?
I was in the United Pentecostal Church for a while. Then I left and went to a more charismatic church. There are some differences between that I couldn't really reconcile, but aside, they were great people, and the same God that moves in a Pentecostal church is the same God that moves in the charismatic church. It's the same God that works in the Word of Faith church. God, we tend to put up these denominational barriers and isolate God and put him in a box and say he can't work outside of this norm. But God honors faith wherever he finds it. It doesn't matter even if you go to church. God honors faith right where you are.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter what denomination it is. I've heard of Catholic church and people speaking in tongues before. I've had evangelists come and talk about how in Ireland, how some of the Catholics started speaking in tongues when he went there to preach. So God honors faith wherever he finds it. That's one of the greatest lessons I've learned. God is not tied to denominations.
Right. I think theology is very important,
I
but
think it is too.
sometimes we are so hung up on theology that we build walls
Mm-hmm.
between us and people who don't believe the way that we do. I think
Absolutely.
that's why we emphasize the essentials in Christianity. These are the things that we all have to be in agreement on. The
Mm-hmm.
deity of Christ, the virgin birth, original sin, justification by faith, the resurrection, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what I deal with is people who want to divide over non-essentials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What level of the ark did Noah stay on anyway? I think it was the third level. Somebody the other day said it was the second level, so had three levels. So
Yeah,
you can debate that, but it doesn't really matter.
Bible prophecy is a good example.
That's another example. Yeah. Yeah.
You get into some areas in Bible prophecy, you take 10 people, you're gonna have 10 different views.
Mm-hmm.
So do we really want to divide over things like that? So we'll talk about all these things in the future. Marcus is just like I am. He is a voracious reader and researcher, and he goes into areas that I don't go into. I go into areas he doesn't go into, and then we share. The Bible says,
Mm-hmm.
as iron sharpens iron, a friend
Right.
sharpens. So we work together on a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and that's I'm foreseeing the next 10, 15, 20 years, however long we have until the Lord returns or till we cash in our chips. We're going to be doing probably apologetics and theological type
Mm-hmm.
information for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And, because it is so vitally needed. And I'm approaching my senior years before too long, and I want people to be able to take advantage of the things that I've learned over my years. Marcus, how long has it been since that guy came to you and knocked on your door, Marcus?
I was like 1981, I believe it was.
Yeah, so it'd be
Yeah.
38 years. So you
Mm-hmm.
got experience under your belt too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's been a long journey.
we'll be working together to pass on what we've learned, not only from our life experiences, but from our research and writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, thanks for joining me, Marcus. We're going to
Yeah.
wrap
You're
up here.
welcome.
And Marcus hopefully will be joining me once or twice a month for different podcasts. This is the first video podcast. The ones that we did in the past were just audio.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an experiment to see how this works. We'll be learning from it and so forth. So anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll keep you updated on future podcasts on the YouTube channel. We'll see you later.
All right. So long.